What if the sacred researches you? What does it mean to let your body be the site of multi-species collaboration that does not necessarily contribute to your own aliveness? And as someone with a body that is not a unity, where I have connective tissue, where, my joints sublux, it's those places of friction, those places where I do rupture, where I do leak, that I feel myself being investigated by the sacred. How can we feel ourselves as part of a pattern and less part of matter? And, it's a very process philosophy. How can we feel like we're doorways for matter that's flowing through us?
And it seems the streams and flows, virtual and dreamlike, are teaching me that what's more powerful than power is ecstasy. Because power is a form of containment, is a form of colonization. Something else needs to be born. And I don't know that any of us can fully articulate this moment. All we can do, I think, is to lean in with deep humility.
Welcome to this timeless episode where we explore our archives and we find timeless wisdom that can land in your bodies, minds, and souls in this moment today. This week's episode is taken from a conversation that was called Reimagined Education, Cybernetic Flow and Bewilderment, episode 147 with Sophie Strand and Bayo Akomolafe, two of the most beautiful, incredible, articulate writers of this time. This conversation was made in partnership with the Reimagining Education Conference, which invites new connections and deepening relationships that will transform higher education within and beyond academia. The conference was asking the question, how do we reframe and sustain learning environments that honor diverse knowledge, ecologies, and cosmologies in a rapidly changing world? This particular session was called Researching the Sacred. Sophie Strand is a writer based in the Hudson Valley who focuses on the intersection of spirituality, storytelling, and ecology. But it would probably be more authentic to call her a troubadour animist with a propensity to spin yarns that inevitably turn into love stories. Give her a salamander and a stone, and she'll write you a love story. Sophie was raised by house cats, puffballs, possums, raccoons, and an opinionated crippled goose. In every neighborhood she's ever lived, she's been known as the walker. She believes strongly that all thinking happens interstitially, between beings, ideas, differences, mythical gradients. Her poems and essays have appeared in numerous projects and publications, including Spirituality and Health, Atmos, Braided Way, and Art Papers. She is the author of The Flowering Wand, The Madonna Secret, and the forthcoming memoir, The Body is a Doorway, as well as the creator of the popular Substack, Make Me Good Soil. Her new book, The Body is a Doorway, is a lyrical, radically expansive self-portrait with searing insight and honesty, the intersecting spaces of her own chronic illness, the complex ecology of a changing world, and the very nature of the stories we tell ourselves. Bayo Akomolafe is a poet, philosopher, psychologist, professor, and chief curator of the Emergence Network. He curates this earth-wide project for the recalibration of our ability to respond to civilisational crisis, a project framed within a feminist ethos and inspired by indigenous cosmologies. Bayo has authored books such as These Wilds Beyond Our Fences, Letters to My Daughter on Humanity's Search for Home, and co-authored We Will Tell Our Own Story, The Lions of Africa Speak. Bayo hopes to inspire a diffractive network of sharing, a slowing down, an ethics of entanglement, an activism of inquiry, a politics of surprise, one that does not treat the crises of our times as exterior to us or the solutions that conventional activism offers us, as discrete or separate from the problems that we seek to nullify. He hosts a course, We Will Dance with Mountains, Let Us Make Sanctuary, a ceremonial inquiry, collective sense-making, and prophetic exile, where we might unlearn mastery, become fugitive, and slow down in times of urgency. Both Sophie and Bayo have been on this podcast individually in beautiful episodes. And there's also an episode in our archives where Bayo is with Charles Eisenstein and Manish Jain, So do have fun in the archives, re-listening to those epics in full. And now for this timeless, where we explore the question, how to re-understand power and presence in search of the sacred. We hope that hearing just this small part will give you the space to contemplate, integrate, and embody what you hear. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Tala Oak. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies, to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams, and we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible.
The sacred is that to be grasped, to be accumulated, to be understood. How can I pin it down or find it? And I was thinking that, at least in my own situated experience, my approach to the sacred would be to flip the paradigm and to ask, what if the sacred researches you? What does it mean to let your body be the site of multi-species collaboration that does not necessarily contribute to your own aliveness? What does it mean to look at your haunted nervous system, your non-neuronormativity, your illness, your decay and rot as an investigation in process? I think of the sacred as being an interruption in scheduled programming. It's like an inconvenience. It's a category violation. My favorite quote is by this philosopher Gaston Bachelard, and he says, "Wolves in shells are crueler than stray ones." And I think that the sacred plays by a similar set of rules, which is not rules. Gods with animal heads are more sacred than human ones. I write a lot about Second Temple period Palestine and folkloric oral Judaism, and how it was structured around interpreting texts communally, reinterpreting these things in an adaptive, unfolding way. And I'm particularly interested in how Jesus both walked into that ritual practice and also interrupted it. And that his parables they didn't fit into the expected traditional roles of myth and storytelling in scripture at the time period. His parables were intentionally combative. You know, saying the mustard seed is like the kingdom to Galilean farmers is like saying that it's like the invasive species that's taking down your agricultural profits that are keeping your family alive as the kingdom, and it's present right now. His approach to the sacred was to create a container where interruption happens, where people are constantly butting in on each other. The sacred is always a rupture. It's always a leakage. And as someone with a body that is not a unity, where I have connective tissue, where, you know, my joints sublux, it's those places of friction, those places where I do rupture, where I do leak, that I feel myself being investigated by the sacred. So that's my a very initial kind of massaging of that.
For me, the sacred is this tense in-between, this in-betweenness of things, this incompleteness of things that can stay within the prospects and the smell and the whiff of war, and at the same time sense of forlorn hope that there is something yet to come, that there is emancipation, freedom, possibly a glimpse of a different kind of peace that might yet be, even in the midst, in the womb of the slave ship, even in the midst of this war that is rolling out. So I think of the sacred as the amniotic incompleteness of things, the idea that the world is never fully capturable, never fully legible or intelligible, and that this idea that the sacred is fugitive, maybe God's whispers, when we expect the thunder and the lightning at the top of the mountain, Mount Sinai, this idea that the small and the indescribably little, the critters around us. Sophie speaks a lot about the microbial and the mycorrhizal and the rhizomatic, that somewhere within this tenuous, creaturely, fragile path that we're making through the world together, the sacred is at the very tip of this lichenizing pathway that we are making together. And maybe that gives me my greatest sense of hope, even as I feel the tremor from Ukraine, that we will not be fully captured, no matter the fascist arrangements that spring from this machine that we call capitalism or modernity, that we will not be fully identified, that I have a right to opacity, that I will not be fully named. And therein lies the sense of the sacred I'm in touch with right now.
I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of emergence and about how you can't plan for emergence, and that in terms of a lot of the climatological things we're predicting, we probably don't actually understand what's going to happen, that the very nature of complexity is that you can't game it and that we're just a part of it. I've been thinking about how the sacred is an emergency and an emergence, and that we jump levels of complex organization not because we think our way through complexity, but that we relax into the morphological component of these coalescing patterns. Like, how can we feel ourselves as part of a pattern and less part of matter? And, it's a very process philosophy. How can we feel like we're doorways for matter that's flowing through us? I mean, I love academia. I very much understand the ways it can contain, life is containment. It is lipid cells that contain life briefly, but then it has to rupture in order to reproduce. And so I think academia needs to cultivate rupture a little bit in order to create those emergent systems that help us to improvisationally work with these larger stories.
This feels like a question of placemaking for me, how we make home, how we ritualize the everyday. What choices are available? I hardly ever use that word choice. Maybe it's my repudiation of of course, my upbringing, which I'm still connected to, even though I pretend abandonment sometimes. But choice, how we choose and how we desire. And I feel attracted to the story of, and I tell this all the time, but it needs to be told more often. During my quest to decolonize myself, as if that were an exclusive journey, a linearity through being colonized and arriving at some wokeness, I asked a question. I said, if our gods, Eshu, Obatala, Orunmila, if these orishas, the Yoruba cosmology, the Yoruba mythology, if it's real, if our gods are powerful, then why didn't they do anything about those people who came in ships and took millions of us away? Why didn't they do anything about that? Some of the writers that I deeply respect and elders from our place responded with story and would tell the story of the god of victory or the god of war, Ogun, mounting up an insurgency against the slavers and rushing to the beach with an army and being met on the way by his brother, Eshu. Eshu comes and drugs his brother and goes and puts him to sleep, and then does the seemingly hateful and insidious thing of traveling with the slaves, not stopping the whole enterprise, but actually perpetuating it by traveling up and down the Atlantic with the slaves. And I didn't understand this idea. And so another question was born then, because the first question wasn't fully articulated or fully answered. So what is more powerful than power? And it seems the streams of and flows, virtual and dreamlike, are teaching me that what's more powerful than power is ecstasy, because power is a form of containment, is a form of colonization. It's an image. It's building an image. It's restoring an image. It's how we take care of ourselves within an image, within a sense of the familiar. But it is often the case that the familiar becomes toxic and we need to travel. So Sophie's speaking about ruptures, right? Breaking through lipid cells and looking for other transmutational boundaries to explore and differences. It seems to me that the question you ask, Amisha, is really about how we travel and how we hold each other in this traveling. how we hold each other in this time of uncertainty, of rupture, of deep and troubling failure and dizziness. I must throw in dizziness there. I spoke with a group yesterday and they spoke about pandemic dizziness, that people are falling over. It almost reminds me of the origins of trauma in 19th century Europe, when people started to fall over and they called it railway spine. It seems we're back there again at this precipice of things. And we're being invited to make place and make room in different ways. Maybe that's why we're giving ourselves 6 feet between, because something needs to come between. Something needs to be allowed into our ritualized ways of conditioning ourselves to be individuals. Something else needs to be born. And I don't know that any of us can fully articulate this moment. All we can do, I think, is to lean in with deep humility. Our practice must be to unlearn mastery. Our practice must be to tell stories, to rejuvenate archives, pedagogies that help us sit here, not pedagogies that rush us into blueprints of the future, that teach us to haughtily pronounce what the next might look like, but that we cannot summarily, on our own accord, summon the sense of humility. One cannot be humble by one's own means. You have to be met and defeated over and over again. So we need pedagogies that help us become defeated and to stay in a sense of defeat or humility, where humus is a coming down to earth.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. This is one of our timeless editions, a short and powerful piece of wisdom for you to contemplate, integrate, and embody. We have an archive of over 200 epics, long, deep conversations for you to explore, share, and enjoy. We keep this podcast advertising free, as we don't want to sell you things that you don't need. This is made possible by you supporting our work as a member of Presence Collective, a patron, or through joining our offerings. You can also support us by sharing this with those that you love. Can you send it to 10 people who you know will find it powerful? This podcast is made by an all-female global team. You can explore our world at allthatweare.org and find your ways to take part. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. We exist to offer a space of sanctuary in the ever-increasing chaos, a place where you can come and be in good company, a place where you can learn, unlearn, and connect to your own wisdom. And know that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.